lessons that have brought me to where I am today, many of them I learned at the kitchen table talking to, because I understand the value of being a proud African-American woman. And we have Miss Levert from over at Dunbar Library, which was the African-American or Black library. He was elected as the first African-American constable, and we're still having first, but we have to continue to have first until we have multiple elections, multiple appointments of African Americans being able to have their footprint all over this.
What is your perspective on the current events?
Well, you know, a lot of attention has been brought to our civil rights violations, injustice because of the murders. And we certainly need to focus on that. As an African American woman who came up in a corporate environment and had to climb to get to the position that I finally retired at, senior management in a major corporation, it's important for us to look at the space that we're in. It's not just looking at the murders, but the criminal justice system touches on so many parts of our lives daily. And so at the state level of the NAACP, our leadership has recently delivered a Save the World restorative criminal justice plan that we have been trying to roll out. We have been working on this for a while now, and it seems that we're getting some pushback from even within our own resources that we don't need to tackle this issue, that the white community can speak for us. They can take care of getting all the issues resolved. Well, that's part of the problem, and that's part of why where we are today, because our voices aren't heard. Our voices are not a part of it. When you talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity, that means you hear me and you take action on the equity piece of what it is that I've brought to you. Businesses are impacted. Employment is impacted. Certainly how you're treated if you're caught in the judicial and criminal justice process. Opportunities for promotions on your jobs. Opportunities for continuing your education, raising your children, dealing with social issues that involve health, mental health issues, issues that engage and impact our seniors. You know, I'm a senior, so I'm always concerned about that. And so what is it that our senior African American community needs? It may be that the need is already there, but are we connected to it? Do we know that it exists? Are we providing the information? Or is it just that it exists and our community being all over the city, is not aware of it? This electoral process that we're dealing with, this craziness with the post office, these are things with high priority, and they all are happening at one time. You know, I tell the leadership team that civil rights happens 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so you don't decide, oh, I'm going to take a break from civil rights. I'll get back to it in the next 2 or 3 days. I'm going to go hang out. I'm going to go do whatever. And I think that's the point that I've also tried to hone in on, is that civil rights violations or the need to have justice with civil rights is something that happens every day, all day long. The systems and the systematic practices that we are engaged in as a country, most of the time will impact African Americans in a negative way. And so we need to dismantle systemic acts of racism wherever they are. And if they're not affecting you today, just hang on. They will affect you maybe in generations to come or as you age. And so these are things that I'm trying to make sure that we're aware of.
And everyone, you know, I say this all the time. It's not about us. It's not about what's happening right now. It is what's happening right now, but how can we look towards the future? As Ms. Spears said, it's generational. How can we make it better for the next generation, younger generation, my brother's generation, great-grandchildren? Because every person who comes on this earth has a duty to make it better. That's why we increase our knowledge. That's why we build that knowledge and actually act on it. What is your purpose here? Because I believe my purpose is to help educate the masses, and I hope that's what this discussion is enabling people to do. People my age, people that are older, maybe haven't learned this. So this is the perfect opportunity.
And Ms. Spears, I just want to ask you another question.
Okay.
So what advice would you give for others in the San Angelo community and just in the youth in general and how they can become part of this fight for equality. And even if you want to define some of the terms of diversity and inclusion, those have been coming up a lot now. So I was going to turn it to you.
Well, you know, when you look at the youth, I don't just look just at the African American youth. I know a lot of our African American youth are getting involved with the concept of Black Lives Matter, not the organization. So when I look at that, I look at structure. I think when I was a young girl growing up in Fort Worth, that a lot of young people were involved in the movement. They had their different roles, they did different things. But when we look at the civil rights movement, you know, we just lost Congressman Lewis. And so you go back now, people are seeing that young people who were his age, 19, 20, 21, were doing things to make a difference in the civil rights movement of the 60s. The civil rights movement has not stopped. It has not ended. I think the recent cases of police brutality have brought attention to the fact that maybe this is the continuation of the civil rights movement. But what I say to the young people is that we need the young people and we need the older generation to come together and work together. Today, it's important that you have structure in activities that you're trying to do to bring about a difference. We can't just be out there not knowing the history, not knowing process, and even dealing with how you could do a protest in your city. And these are the things that I want to say back in the day, so to speak, with that civil rights movement that we're now focusing on from Congressman Lewis. There was structure, there was organization, there was protocol, there was order, there was pecking order. And so, we hear of Dr. King and we think he did all of this by himself. He did not. He was the spokesperson. So that speaks to the protocol. And so what we want to look at is having the young people and the older generations and everyone in between to connect and learn from each other. For instance, the younger generation can do a lot of things and get messaging out very quickly from a technological perspective. They may not think through the issue in as much detail as maybe the middle-aged or older generation can. So together, if we can figure out how to get the messaging out quickly by working through those generations, understanding structure, you can't have multiple leaders. You just can't have multiple leaders to speak for an organization. And I think that's also a point that I've realized here in this city, that people want to speak, and as they would have told me as a little girl, they're out of order. And so that gets confusing. That creates animosity and hard feelings and distrust. So we have to understand a protocol. We have to understand how to work together. I'm very techie, but there are things that I've not kept up with since I retired that I have to rely on people like you, Destiny, to keep me current. I'm working with the president of the ASU Collegiate Chapter to help me with some things for voter activation. Well, some of those things I can do, but why not turn it over to the younger generation so they can start learning as they get older how to move these things forward. So my advice is to join us, especially if you don't have a platform. I don't know that we need any more platforms. I think that what we need to do is connect with the platforms that exist and strengthen them. That's what I see a lot of going on also, is that we are guided by the position sometimes of white America to create something new. And as the Bible tells us, there's nothing new under the sun. So we're here. We have a platform. We have the opportunity for you to speak. We have historical information. We have data. We have research. So what we need to do is just figure out how to work collectively and benefit from that. I'm not talking about just soft issues. There are a lot of issues that are pretty deep that we need to be tackling, but there seems to be a fear, as I said earlier, of we can't do that at the plantation, okay? The mindset, we have to do it this way so that the people who run the plantation are comfortable with that. But we're not concerned about whether or not they're comfortable. It's how we create the opportunity to take those messages out. As I get older, there are things that I want to see happen in government with opportunities that seniors can have, the services they can have. When I think back on the younger generation, your children, my grandchildren generation, I want them to have a great opportunity starting out. I want them to be proud of who they are. I want them to know their history. I want them to be involved civically. We don't need people telling us what we need to do in our own community. Cultures are different. We can make modifications, but we need to guide what happens to us. We don't need other people trying to tell us how we need to live our lives and what we need. We have been through generations of empowerment, education, experiences. We need to work together to determine what it is that we need in our own communities.
I agree. Get together. There's the NAACP on campus at Angelo State University, San Angelo. Try to find one on your campus for whoever is watching. If you do not have one on your campus, I could help you. I've done it. We have the resources. We can do it.
But I guess for the last little tidbit, I know that was going to be the last one, but I have another one that's going to be a very interesting question. So we talked about the idea, I think it's gone through, especially after George Floyd, the idea of talking about privilege. How can you use your privilege to aid other people? And what's your perspective on that? And give a little bit of advice as well, because do you believe that it's our job to educate the white population on this, or is it their duty to educate each other? What do you think about that?
Well, I think that we do have a duty and a responsibility to educate our community. But here's my point, is that you can't educate a diverse community if you don't know yourself. So it's important for us, this COVID-19 experience, I have been pushing for families to get together and have weekly, at least, discussions at the kitchen table, such as what I experienced growing up, to talk about these things, to share what's going on. Mental health, I mentioned that earlier. Let's talk about what our young people saw when they saw the George Floyd. Let's talk about what our children just saw with Mr. Blake being shot 8 times. Let's have some discussion and let's go back to Emmett Till and talk about how that happened. Let's talk about the college students who were dealing with Freedom Summer and how they were murdered, and there were Black and white students. Let's talk about what it took to organize to sit in at a lunch counter so that you could be in an integrated environment. And so we have to know our own history before we can share it. But we do have, I believe, a responsibility of sharing the information through whatever means that we have. And there are a lot of non-African Americans who were with us in the 50s, who are still with us and who are with us today, a new generation of them. But they have a responsibility as well to be informed and to understand what we're feeling. They can't walk in our shoes, or as I say for myself, they can't walk in my stilettos, but they can try to have some understanding. And when there is a refusal to understand what I'm going through, and that my story is my story and your story is your story, and that together, if we pull all of that together, we can tell a story, right? Then everyone can be involved. What I experienced as an African American to someone who is in my same age group who is non-African American, maybe we can take that difference and create the story that exists and tell the truth about it. I have sent out information to our NAACP members about some anti-racist material, a lot of anti-racist material that they can read that was written by white people. Perhaps it's better for them to understand it from a white perspective, why some things are considered white privilege, because they've never really looked at it. They've been socialized in that way. I was talking to a white friend the other day, and they have biases that they didn't even realize they had. Such is the case with many people. And so we do have a responsibility, but I think the opportunity comes with us collectively working together and trying to tear down those biases and understanding. It's just like people are attacking Black Lives Matter by saying, well, all lives matter. Well, until all Black lives matter, all lives don't matter. Because we've had all of this time where we have been marginalized as African Americans, and our lives did not matter. So right now, our lives matter, and we are ringing the bell, and we are taking action and saying that Black lives matter. And when all Black lives matter, other lives also matter. It's not to say that it doesn't matter today, but we've got to get out of this hole that we have been thrown in many instances, and start focusing on things that matter and are important to us, and stop allowing the status quo and the systems that are in place to apply to us as African Americans, because they were never intended to apply to us as African Americans, because our point of view was not always at the table. And so as African Americans, we need to stop being negative about Black Lives Matter and understand the very essence of what that means all the way to the White House and within your own communities. And as whites, we need to stop being judgmental. And we need to be clear, I think, of some of the protests that are going on and who's really causing it. You know, I was talking to one of our white leaders a couple of years ago, and one of the things, and I don't have it verbatim, but he was saying, you know, some white people are just fearful that they'll have to give up so much just to make Black people whole. You know, that really meant a lot for me to hear that from someone that I feel is fair-minded. But that is part of the problem, is that we need to make sure that we're not leaving our destiny, no pun intended, to others to make decisions for us. We need to make our own decisions. And in order to make those decisions, Dezzi, we have to shift, we have to engage, we have to advocate and stop putting negative terms on people and processes that help move the needle. You know, just how long are we supposed to just accept what it is that has been established? We need to create our own newness, our own space with our own rules, because we understand what the laws are. And short of not breaking any laws, then we're very capable of creating processes that support the empowerment and the opportunity for African Americans.
I think you ended on a perfect note.
Everyone, educate yourselves, educate each other, read. Read. During quarantine, we had so much time, but even with school, a lot of things have slowed down. So you have the opportunity. Get out and speak to people. But I just want to thank our guest today, Ms. Sherley Spears. Go to the NAACP websites, y'all. Get involved. And everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, Ms. Spears.
Thank you, Dezzi. Love you.
Love you too. Okay. Talk to you later.